Well, hey guys, welcome to the Reach Right podcast, episode number 35. I am your host, Thomas Costello, and with me, as always, is my co-host,
Ian Hyatt. Hey, Thomas, how's it going?
Going good, Ian. Looking forward to diving into our conversation here today. We're talking about how your church can better assimilate online attenders. I think it's going to be a good conversation because we have seen a enormous groundswell of more and more people attending church online in the COVID-19 season and 2020 into 2021 here. And I think that that's something that a lot of churches really struggle with is how do I, now that people are watching us online, how do I get them connected and how do we kind of assimilate them? How do we disciple these people that are in services? I think as church leaders, most churches we talk to already struggle with assimilating people that show up. So I think it's even harder when it's online. So what do you think?
That's exactly what I was about to say. You took the words right out of my mouth because, I mean, we've seen that for years. I think churches have gotten better at it over the last several years for sure, compared to when we first started consulting churches over 10 years ago, where it was like assimilation. What? We just, we give them a phone call or show up at their door and that was it or something like that after they attended for the first time. So, I think, with the challenge of churches being, since the pandemic, catapulted into the whole making up in their game with digital and their whole streaming experience, it presents a new challenge that, you're right, was already a challenge before. But churches, there's been a lot of churches excelling at that, and we're going to be talking about some good ways to do that here today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big, I don't know, you call it probably a theological question that we're wrestling with in the church right now is it valid? Is it a valid expression of worship to be an online attender of a church? Is that to be like seen as a second class kind of a relationship with the church, or is it a real full-fledged? Can you be a full-fledged God-following, Jesus-serving member of a church who never steps foot into a building and only is part of an online church? I don't have the answer to that question. I think I've become more open to the concept, at least over the last 18 months or so, and seeing some of these changes that are happening. But I think whether we like it or not, that is the way a lot of people are relating to churches right now, is they are exclusively online attending. And whether that's because of COVID or because they just don't want to show up in person, or they live too far away from a church they like in person. I don't know all the reasons why, but I think that's just a reality we live in right now, is that there are people that are their only expression of worship and their only encounter with the people of God happens online. And so the question we have to be asking is, how do we help these people assimilate? But really what we mean by that is, how do we disciple these people? How do we turn these people that hear the gospel, maybe for the first time online, how do we turn them into God-following, fully committed members of the body of Christ? And I think that's a really big question that I don't suspect we'll be able to answer completely today. But I think that it's something that we can kind of take a stab at and give some of the ideas we're hearing and give people a good kickstart on something like that. So why don't you kick us off with number one, the first way to better assimilate online attenders?
Yeah, thanks. Will do, and I think it's a good first one to kick off. It's let's treat them like people, because they are. They are real people, even if you're not seeing them physically or in person. This is a real living, breathing soul that God has created that is there and has interest in your church and your message. And so they definitely deserve, and you should treat them like a real person, because as we're talking, as you just mentioned, you hit the nail on the head. At the end of the day, assimilation is discipleship. So if we're going to disciple anyone, whether or not it's a person over the phone, through whatever, we have to treat them like a real person and know that they are. And so I think that is now how to do that, and the strategy to connect with them on a personal level. Well, that's what we'll be digging into more. But I think that step number one is to have that mindset, when you say, is that, hey, these people that are showing up, they may not be like what we're counting as far as, average physical attenders on a weekly basis, but they are showing up, online.
I think this is something that we've discovered has happened over and over again as technology has progressed, that at first, when new technology happens, there seems to be this tendency to treat it as like a second-class version of the authentic thing. So we saw this. Do you remember the first person you ever met that you heard that they met their spouse or someone that they fell in love with online? Do you remember like
Yeah.
that first person? You looked at them like, really? Like that
Yeah.
is weird. Like that
That's
you would meet
desperate.
someone that's desperate.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
whatever. It just you would think of it almost like it was a step behind people that meet in normal ways. I don't know how that even
Yeah.
is nowadays. It was
Yeah.
in bars or in
Yeah.
college or whatever it would be. But
Yeah.
I remember it was probably the mid '90s, and there's this guy in our
Yeah.
church who had a new girlfriend he met online, and we just you got to be kidding me. Like that's just the
Yeah.
weirdest thing
Yeah.
we've ever heard of. And
Yeah.
now that's the standard way that people
Yeah.
seem to get together is whenever the app of the day is on how people are meeting one another. So I think that we've seen that, and part of it is just starting to really think through that idea that these are absolutely not they're real people. Like the people that are
Yeah.
watching online, they, like you said, they have souls and they count, and they're just as engaged in a lot of cases as someone that's sitting there right in front of you. I
Yeah.
find this to be the case too, is that when people are online, a lot of times we think of them differently. Like, so you think about the way that people are much more confrontational online than they would ever be in person, right? Like, so
Yeah.
we see this in the way people interact with one another on Twitter or any kind of social media channel. These people that are mild-mannered and would never say something to your face, they have this new kind of boldness because there's this weird disconnect between the fact that just because someone's typing this in or they're online, that they're not really there. But I think just changing our attitudes about that, it makes a huge difference in how we treat
Yeah.
them. And I think that sets the tone for the entire rest of the conversation on how we're reaching people.
And one more thing I'll add to that before you tackle the next one is that it reminded me of when you and I first started consulting churches and helping them with websites and getting,
Right.
when just getting audio messages of a pastor's sermon, and this is after it was recorded, onto the website was such a new thing.
Right.
And there used to be pastors that were so fearful of like, oh my gosh, this is going to replace people actually physically coming to church. They're just going to get online, and these pastors were really afraid of just people listening online, not even watching yet.
Right.
And the really cutting edge churches had video going, but that was rare back when we started that. And then so now the cool thing that we started seeing was then all of a sudden those pastors that took the plunge and they got their audio messages online would have people show up 2 weeks later after they've been listening and they made a decision for the Lord in their living room, and then they got connected physically to the church, and then pastors were like, oh wow, well this is actually something that God uses and that works. So it made me think of that.
This is the main takeaway is this is a normal technology pattern, is that at first we're just kind of like, this is a second class thing, and then it becomes part of the normal. And so you could have mixed feelings about this. I know I have mixed feelings about whether or not that's a legitimate expression of someone's weekly worship. Does that suffice when Scripture says that we not forsake the gathering together as we're in the custom of doing? Is being online for a gathering, does that count in God's eyes? There's all kinds of questions around that. But I think that 10 years from now, this won't even be a question, that this will be something that will be very commonplace. So treating people like they're real, because they actually are, whether we like the idea or not, they are real people. And that helps us get the right mindset about this, which leads me to number 2. Because they're real people, we need to incentivize them to give us their information if they're attending online. And this is one of the things that every church seems to get this in person on Sunday mornings. Most churches, if someone's there for the first time, you have some kind of an incentive, whether it be a coffee mug or a gift card to something or a free book or whatever it is. You ask people to, hey, fill out that visitor card. We want to just say thanks, and as a gift, we're going to give you something in return. But I have yet to see many churches do a good job of this online, finding ways to incentivize. And here's what we've learned is that if you don't incentivize people to give you their information, they will not give you their information. The old days of, hey, would you please fill this out so we can connect with you or so we can follow up with you? Or I think people are afraid that there's going to come someone like a Jehovah's Witness is going to come knocking at their door and want to do Bible studies with them and stuff. And so they're reluctant to do that. But if we can help ease their fears of it being really making it a displacement in their lives, and then incentivize it at the same time, I think goes a long way, even more so if we do it online, because people are very leery of putting their information into forums online and connecting that way. They kind of have this wall of separation through a computer screen, but if we incentivize them to do that,
so on.
totally. There's all that fear that goes with that there. So what do you have to add to that though, Ian?
Not much other than, I think there's varying ways. We've covered this in podcasts past.
Right.
There's different ways, and that's not our purpose today, is to help you think of what the incentive is or anything. But I think the approach, I think that we've seen work well so far, is that, not to be, for lack of a better word, get all up in their grill.
Right.
Be lighthearted, make it, maybe just leave your email, phone number's optional type thing. I've seen a lot of systems on church websites to where, they make the email option. They make it lighthearted as far as, hey,
Right.
we're not going to hound you. We just want to follow up, give you a gift, see if we can pray for anything, and that's it, type thing.
Yeah.
So I think that, not being too, I would say that would be a good approach and mindset to have if you're going to start planning that.
I think the appeal would be, I would just make it part of every service that I would do. And it'd be something to the effect of, hey, if this is your first time, whether you're here in person or whether you're watching us online, we want to know that you're watching with us, and we want to give you a free gift. Here's what it is. And if you just fill out your information, whatever you're comfortable giving, whether it's we'd like to get your name at least, but if your phone number or email address or whatever you feel comfortable with, we'd just love to say thank you and get you a gift that way. And thank you for being with us here today. Something to that effect that's really not confrontational, but just something that's inviting someone into a relationship. I think that goes a long way. And then with that information, you can actually do number 3, which I'll let you go ahead and cover here now.
Which is, engage them in real conversation. Just like we said, they're real people. So let's incentivize them and let's treat them like real people. Let's engage them in real conversation. And again, I think you just hit the nail on the head, and as we were discussing point number 2, people already have this wall up and they're apprehensive to give this. So, but the more authentic you are, and conversational, like you would just be in person, the more likely they are going to be to take that next step to connect with you further than just past watching your message on a Sunday.
Right.
So starting off and engaging them in a real conversational way. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think this goes beyond that. So the thought is that once we have their information, most churches have some kind of a follow-up process where they engage people, they send emails or text messages or make phone calls or whatever your church does there. But I've seen lots of churches not take that leap to people that are connecting with them online. I know very few churches, honestly, that are calling online visitors, inviting them into conversation, reaching out to them, seeing how you can connect with them, pray with them, those kinds of things. And I think that would really go a long way for a lot of the people that are watching online or connecting that way, is having that conversation. So most churches, it starts and ends with chat. And honestly, I have not seen a lot of really engaging church chats during sermons. Like I haven't seen any, because it's so weird, because it's taking a medium where chatting was always discouraged, right? If you were a pastor and everybody was whispering to their spouse and just talking to their whole message, you'd be like, come on, it would throw me off at least. I'd start to wonder, is my fly down or what's going on, right? If people are doing that. But in this case, we're encouraging people to chat, but the depth of that conversation it's usually not too much. It's, amens and that's great, or, hi everybody, that kind of stuff. Yeah. That's what's happening in there, it's great. I'm not against those things, but I think really engaging them with real conversation, after service, reaching out to them, seeing how you can pray with them, treating them again. When you have this idea that they're real people, you start to think about these kinds of things, and you can actually be praying and engaging and helping and ministering to people that you've only met online. I think this is going to be this is really kind of a wild, wild west for churches, of new frontiers for us to get into. It's a big opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We've seen some churches too, just in closing on that, they actually have a separate message they've made it to be interactive and answer questions on social media. And, they say, hey, this just in from Bob in Phoenix, Arizona here. Bob's asking about what we meant by, what does that scripture mean to him, so on and so forth. And there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I think that, it is something that churches, like you said, it's a new frontier. And it's good to just kind of see what works out there and what maybe would work for your church. So
yeah. Absolutely. Well, number 4, let me hit that one. It's invite people into your membership process, inviting online attenders into actual membership processes. All churches, at least they should have some kind of a formalized membership process. If maybe you don't call it membership, maybe you call it partnership, but as Rick Warren says, every school has an enrollment, every army has, like, people are they care about what they're members of. And when you become a member of something, it shows that you're partnered and you're really a part of something big there. So I think in this way, when you treat people like they're real online, it only makes sense that you would invite them into some kind of membership process. But for most churches, that means rethinking what our membership process looks like. It's not, I didn't really know a lot of churches that had fully online membership processes before the pandemic. But I think it makes a lot of sense now that whatever your growth track or roots class or classes that people go through to become a part of your church, that you need to pull at least a version of those online so that people that you've engaged with, connected with, you got their information, you have something, a next step for them to take part of, to get involved with and to go through that kind of a process there. So does your church have something like that, Ian? You guys are a big church there. Do you guys have an online membership process?
We do. And we have it still in person because, as you know, we've been meeting. Our church is open, and we have the in-person membership class, but we also have a several-step process that we've been able to do online, and whether or not it's through Zoom, I believe, and so and it's worked well. We've definitely had people go through that, and as a matter of fact, we've seen, some of the churches that we've helped, we've set up like this point of contact form. It's an online connection card, and this might be a good idea for some of the pastors listening, that when someone watches a message, whether or not it's live or on demand on your website, have a little online connection card, and simply let them have a checkbox that says, hey, I have either questions about prayer, salvation, or membership, and based upon what they fill out, how to follow up with them. And yes, this may take, if you're meeting in person, you'll probably still do your in-person membership, but then it's going to take maybe someone else, or maybe it is still that same pastor, but maybe someone else that handles the online membership one, and depending on how often you do it and so on. But we've seen some success from it for sure over the pandemic. Awesome. And there's a lot of people that, like you said at the beginning of this might be what they prefer, even if this virus is gone and all of this stuff, they might still prefer this type of member, and it's something to think through. We don't have all the answers to that and what's right, but yeah,
I think you're exactly right with that. And I think just as an encouragement, if you're just starting out and doing an online membership class, it's probably not going to go great the first few times. I think you're learning something new. A lot of churches have well-oiled machines for their membership process, that you've been doing it the same material for 10 or 15 years, and it's been something you've been consistently doing. To try and pull that online, because usually those are really discussion oriented, and meeting new people is part of the focus of those classes. I think it might be a challenge, but I think it's going to be worth it to engage some of these people and bring them into the life of what's happening at the church there.
Yeah, well, that's good. Let's tackle 5. I'll go at that one. Fine, and I kind of jumped ahead earlier to this, I guess, but we'll go a little deeper into this one now. But find ways to engage them rather in service. So, and that could be through, like we said, we mentioned the chat system. It could be prayer. You asked about my church, actually. So what we've used the church online platform, which a lot of churches have used, through that system, I believe. We saw, there's people saying, hey, this is Katie in Conroe, Texas, and they could be close to us or far away from us or whatever. And the pastor could say something in the message and say, man, that's a really good word for me, because I just went through a major illness and God brought me out of it. And then I saw someone pop up when I was watching one of these messages. Someone popped up and said, great, Bob, that's great that God healed you, and praise God. And then they started engaging, thanking each other. And then the pastor brought up another point and someone else commented. And I know we're talking about one way of people interacting during a message, but we're specifically probably should also dive into like how, a staff member or a pastor can engage someone who's new on the So there's a lot of different ways.
Let me add to that too, and I think part of the heart that I have behind that is not just engaging people in the services, but engaging people that are online attenders in being the servers, engaging them in finding places to serve, I think
Yeah.
is really an important part of assimilating them. You think about, again, the way we handle people that come in person. In most churches, you get their information, you engage them in conversation, you invite them into a membership process. And then part of that membership process is you release them into service, right? So you equip
Yeah.
them to join worship teams or serve in kids ministry or do whatever it is. And there are some limitations. It's hard to do on-site children's ministry remotely, right? That's not going to be something they'll be able to do probably, but there are lots of things that that people can do in as acts of service if they are online only attenders, if they've been
Yeah.
engaged. And I think, like, I would love to see more churches using people that don't live in the area as the people running their chat. Like if someone is fully part of your church and they've been online attenders, they
Yeah.
should be engaging people in chat. They should be leading the online prayer team. Maybe they help with some of the creative elements of making the online part of the service more engaging. But I think that just like we do with people that show up in person, asking people to get involved in service after they've gone through this process, that's an
Yeah.
important part of engaging them.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
I think I heard of, well, there's been several examples of this, but that if there's a group of people, and there's a lot of different thoughts on whether or not, someone should be consider themselves a member of your church if they're out of state. But I've heard some
Mm.
cool stories that people gathering together in a living room and
Yeah.
they're listening to watching a certain pastor's message, and after that they all go get inspired to do an outreach together in their local community,
Yeah.
and so I mean, that's not so bad. I mean, and
I,
again, there's a lot of
I think
factors that go.
I
Yeah.
think a lot of pastors are always amazed when they hear that there's people that are connecting with their services that way,
Yeah.
that live so
Yeah.
far away. But I've heard it so many times from so many different churches at this point that it seems more like it's the rule than it is the exception. That,
Yeah.
Pastor, if you're listening to this and you think that it's just your people watching online, that is not correct. There are people
Yeah.
from all over the world that are probably engaging with your messages, and I
Yeah.
think that's something just to take really seriously there. So yeah,
Good.
that's really big. Let me get number 6 here. It's build a small group for people too far away to attend. So this is kind of, again, I think what you'll find in this whole list is it's all the stuff we already do at most churches for
Yeah.
people that show up in person. We just need to be thinking about how we do this for people that are online, because those systems, they worked in a lot of ways, but just
Yeah.
bringing them online for people that live out of state or out of the country, I think it's
Right.
just really valuable there. So I would love to see churches more and more build small groups, not around location in town, but locations around the world. I know
Yeah.
at our church, we have a few dozen people that are listening to our services with regularity, that are meeting. They just do that. And so having an opportunity for them, maybe it's a Zoom call. I don't know how the technology, what the right way to do that is. There's lots of solutions for that. But having something where people consistently get together, I have found that, well, I certainly prefer meeting in person for small groups. I
Yeah.
think that Zoom calls were they were a necessary evil for me, I guess, to stay connected with the body. But I think there's some
Yeah.
people that just do feel really comfortable on a Zoom call in that
Yeah.
kind of a way. So I think that churches would really do well to build small groups around the fact that not everybody lives
Yeah.
in small group range. And to
Yeah.
do that well, you need to have some kind of an online discussion, some kind of way to have an online small group there would make a lot of sense for a lot of churches.
That's good. Well, let me tackle the last one last, but certainly not least. Invite these people to give financially. And I'll tell you, one of the most fulfilling things for me personally, I don't know about you, when the initial shutdown happened, I hate to always keep referring to the pandemic, but that's what birthed a lot of this stuff we're talking about a little bit, or at least accelerated it, I should say.
Yeah.
But basically, I know for me, when we couldn't show up at all physically, and there isn't any outreaches going on or anything like that, the most fulfilling thing for me to do was to be able to give, to be able to give and tithe and that was my way of still, contributing and giving, to the church. And so I think that's, again, these are real people like we've addressed. And why not allow them that opportunity? Again, just like the online connection card and instead we don't want to, we recommend you do this tactfully, and that's not the main thing you're asking for, of course. But but it allows people to take part in serving the Lord and the vision of your church. And that is one of the natural, we've seen for a while now, even before
Yeah.
the pandemic, that after watching a message, that is sometimes people's their next response after they've been encouraged
Yeah.
and inspired. Yeah.
A pastor, kind of mentor of mine, once told me, "Don't ever apologize for talking about giving,"
Yeah.
and that's something that I was in the habit of doing. If I was going to talk about giving or finances in church on a Sunday morning, I would get up there and I'd say something to the effect of, "Hey, if you're new here today, I'm sorry you chose this day to be here. We're going to be talking about something that's for our church family." And that's I understand the heart when people want to do that, is they really want to distance themselves from the idea that we're all about money within the church, or that there's these very few bad apples that kind of poison that for a lot of other people out there. But I think this is one of those things where we've done the same thing, where because there have been so many abuses of people taking advantage of online, or they see websites where the main thing is the give button, and it's all the focus is gaining funds is the main reason churches have websites in some cases. I think that we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater, because I think giving is a really important act of worship for every single believer out there. It's a way that people find an identity with a church, is the place where they give their time, their talent, and their treasures. And so we've talked about them giving their time. We've talked about them giving their talent by serving, but their treasure is an important part of that too, I think. And so I know that there's a lot more buy-in when I'm giving personally towards the work of the ministry. And if we want people to be engaged and assimilated, we need to give them that opportunity to buy in. And what that means is actually talking about that. So maybe writing blog posts about these kinds of topics, talking about it in the chat. And then part of your online membership process, I think most churches, when they do their in-person membership process, they talk about, hey, you should be part of a small group, you should serve, and you should give if you're going to be a part of this church here. So asking online people that are only online to be part of the vision by giving towards it, I think it really helps. It helps the church, obviously, but it helps them engage with your church and be part of the family when they feel like they're part of the mission and they're giving towards it too. So I think that's really, really important, to invite them to give financially and not being afraid, and really never apologizing for that.
Right. No, I think well said. And one thing you said in there that I'll close on, that stuck out to me the most there, was that I think that might be the biggest metric to show how bought in or how much of a member someone is, right?
Yeah.
So is if you're giving, that's where your treasure is. That shows that. So we're talking about all these other things that we hope for them to be assimilated, discipled. If you make it easy for them to give, I think that if that is even their first step that they take, that is great, because if they are bought in to give to your church, then I think all these other avenues to get them plugged in, whether or not that's online, it's membership or discipleship, like we've said, then I think that'll be a lot easier for you if that's what someone does.
Yeah, I think most of us feel like, I agree with you completely. I think that there's this immediate pause that comes when we think should giving be the main metric that we use? No, obviously, that's not but what it is it's the sign of something else happening in someone's heart. It's not and I don't think you're even suggesting that the amount that people give is the measure of how much they love Jesus or a part of our church, but it's the consistency, the willingness, and I think measuring that, how many new people are giving, how many people that have never been to our church before started giving for the first time in this last season there. That's a really important metric to know, because I think it is a sign of where someone's heart is. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So that's something that's really, I think that's biblical, that it's something that we should manage, not for the sake of how much money you make, but for the sake of where people's hearts are. So that's a good way to kind of wrap up here today. So thank you guys so much for being a part of our Reach Right family here. If this podcast has been helpful to you, it would mean a lot to us if you would rate, review, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube or any other channel where they have subscriptions. That's how the algorithms know to let other people know about what's happening there. So if you would do that, that would mean a lot to us. Thank you guys so much for being part of our Reach Right family, and we'll catch you next week.
See you.